The silence after the gavel slammed was a physical blow. My ears rang, not from the sound, but from the sheer injustice of it all. They stood there, a united front, their faces masks of smug satisfaction, as the reality of what they had done crashed over me like a tidal wave. I remember thinking, in that moment, that the air itself had turned to lead, making it almost impossible to breathe. My world, a legacy my parents had built, was gone, snatched away by the very people I should have been able to trust. If your sister is the most important person in your life, subscribe now and share this video with her. My name is Luna, and until that day in the sterile, cold courtroom, I believed in the unbreakable bonds of family. My parents, bless their souls, had always instilled in Martha and me the importance of sticking together, of supporting each other through thick and thin. They ran a successful tailoring business, a business they painstakingly built from the ground up with long hours and unwavering dedication. It wasn't just a business, it was a legacy, a symbol of their love and commitment to each other and to us. Martha, my older sister, always seemed more interested in the glamorous side of life, in designer clothes and social events, while I found solace and satisfaction in the craft itself, in the meticulous art of creating something beautiful and lasting with my own two hands. After our parents left this world unexpectedly, Martha and I were named co-inheritors of the business and the family home. The will stipulated that we were to run the business together, making joint decisions and sharing the profits equally. At first, things seemed to be going smoothly. We divided the responsibilities, with Martha handling the marketing and finances, while I oversaw the design and production aspects. However, it wasn't long before cracks began to appear in the facade of our sisterly harmony. Martha started making decisions without consulting me, decisions that often prioritized short-term profits over the long-term health of the business. She pushed for cheaper fabrics, diluted the quality of our craftsmanship, and even started taking out loans without my knowledge. When I confronted her, she dismissed my concerns, accusing me of being resistant to change and too attached to the old ways. The tension between us grew thicker with each passing day, poisoning the atmosphere both at work and at home. I tried to reason with her, to remind her of our parents' values and the importance of preserving their legacy, but my words fell on deaf ears. Martha was blinded by her ambition, consumed by a desire for wealth and status that seemed to eclipse everything else. One evening, I overheard Martha on the phone, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that I knew was always a warning sign. She was talking to a lawyer, discussing ways to gain full control of the business and the house. The iron scent of betrayal filled my nostrils, and my heart pounded in my chest like a trapped bird. I couldn't believe that my own sister, the person I had shared my entire life with, was plotting to undermine me, to steal everything that was rightfully mine. I confronted her again, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. This time, she didn't even bother to deny it. She coldly informed me that she was tired of my old-fashioned ways, that she had bigger plans for the business, and that I was simply holding her back. She told me that she had already filed legal paperwork to have me removed as a co-owner, and that I should start packing my bags, because I would soon be out on the streets. The person I trusted most was one of them. The audacity of her betrayal left me reeling. I remember stumbling back from her, the world spinning around me as if I were caught in a violent storm. The next few weeks were a blur of legal battles and sleepless nights. I hired a lawyer, a kind older woman named Miss Evans, who listened patiently as I recounted the events leading up to Martha's attempted takeover. Miss Evans explained that Martha had indeed filed paperwork to remove me as a co-owner, citing irreconcilable differences and claiming that my management style was detrimental to the business. She assured me that we had a strong case, that the will was clear in its instructions, and that Martha's actions were a clear violation of its terms. But the legal system is a slow and grinding machine, and Martha had already gained significant ground. She had used her position to manipulate the company's finances, siphoning off funds into personal accounts and creating a paper trail that painted me as an incompetent and irresponsible manager. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, suffocating me with anxiety and despair. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I found myself constantly on edge, waiting for the next blow to fall. I tried to talk to Martha, to appeal to her sense of reason and sisterly love, but she remained cold and unyielding, her eyes glinting with a hard, unfamiliar light. She accused me of being jealous of her success, of trying to hold her back from achieving her full potential. She even went so far as to say that our parents would have been ashamed of me, that I was a failure who couldn't adapt to the changing times. Her words were like knives, twisting in my heart and leaving me bleeding and broken. As the legal battle dragged on, the financial strain began to take its toll. Martha had frozen my access to the company accounts, leaving me with no income to pay for my legal fees or even to cover my basic living expenses. I was forced to sell some of my personal belongings, pieces of jewelry and artwork that had been passed down through generations, just to make ends meet. The thought of losing everything, of being left with nothing but the clothes on my back, filled me with a bone-deep terror.
I remember one particularly bleak evening, sitting alone in the darkened house, the weight of my parents' legacy pressing down on me. The house felt empty and cold without their presence, haunted by the ghosts of happier times. I looked around at the familiar surroundings, at the photographs on the walls, at the worn furniture that held so many memories, and a wave of despair washed over me. I felt like I was losing not only my business and my home, but also my connection to my past, to my family, to everything that had ever mattered to me. It was in that moment of utter despair that a flicker of defiance ignited within me. I realized that I couldn't give up, that I owed it to my parents, to myself, to fight back against Martha's treachery and reclaim what was rightfully mine. I started to meticulously document everything that Martha had done, gathering evidence of her financial manipulations, her unauthorized loans, and her attempts to undermine my authority. I spent hours poring over company records, searching for discrepancies and inconsistencies that could prove her wrongdoing. It was a painstaking and exhausting process, but with each piece of evidence I uncovered, my resolve grew stronger. I knew that I was David facing Goliath, but I was determined to fight with every ounce of strength and cunning I possessed. Ms. Evans, despite her best efforts, warned me that the odds were stacked against us. Martha had hired a high-powered corporate lawyer, a ruthless shark who specialized in exploiting loopholes and intimidating opponents. She advised me to consider a settlement, to cut my losses and move on with my life. But I refused to back down. I told Ms. Evans that I wasn't fighting just for myself, but for my parents' legacy, for the principles of fairness and justice, and for the hope that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the truth could still prevail. The day they tried to end me was the day revenge was born. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm cloud, dark and heavy with foreboding. I sat in the courtroom, Ms. Evans by my side, feeling like a lamb being led to the slaughter. Martha sat across from me, her face a mask of icy indifference, her expensive suit a stark contrast to my own threadbare attire. Her lawyer, a man with a shark-like grin and eyes that seemed to calculate my every move, presented their case with ruthless efficiency. He painted me as an incompetent, irresponsible, and emotionally unstable individual who was unfit to manage the business. He presented falsified financial records, manipulated emails, and even character witnesses who testified against me, painting a distorted picture of my actions and intentions. I listened in stunned silence as my reputation, my integrity, and my entire life were systematically torn to shreds. Ms. Evans fought valiantly, presenting evidence of Martha's wrongdoing and arguing that the will was clear in its instructions.
But it was clear that the judge was already leaning in Martha's favor. The courtroom felt like it was shrinking, the air growing thinner with each passing moment. The weight of Martha's betrayal, the financial strain, and the relentless legal pressure had taken their toll. I felt like I was drowning, sinking deeper and deeper into a sea of despair with no hope of rescue. Then came the verdict. The judge ruled in Martha's favor, granting her full control of the business and the house. He stated that while the will did stipulate joint ownership, Martha had demonstrated a clear ability to manage the business effectively, while I had failed to adapt to the changing market conditions. The gavel slammed down,
the sound echoing through the courtroom like a death knell, sealing my fate. My world dissolved. Walking out of the courtroom felt surreal, like I was watching myself from a distance. The city noises were muffled, distant. I remember aimlessly wandering the streets, the cold wind whipping around me, feeling utterly lost and alone. The faces of strangers blurred into an indistinguishable mass, each one a silent reminder of my own failure. I had lost everything: my business, my home, my family, and my sense of self-worth. Martha had effectively erased me from her life, casting me out like a discarded object. I found myself standing on a bridge, staring down at the dark, turning water below. The thought of simply letting go, of ending it all, flickered through my mind like a dangerous flame. The crimson temptation to just cease to exist was immense. The pain was too much to bear, the burden too heavy to carry. But then a memory surfaced, a faint echo of my parents' voices, reminding me of their strength, their resilience, and their unwavering belief in me. I remembered their sacrifices, their hard work, and their determination to build a better life for their children. I knew that they wouldn't want me to give up, to surrender to despair. They would want me to fight back, to reclaim my life, and to honor their legacy. The weakness in my knees began to recede. It was in that moment, standing on the edge of oblivion, that something shifted within me. The despair didn't vanish, but it was joined by a cold, hard knot of resolve. The victim was gone. The planner was born. I would not let Martha win. I would not let her erase my existence. I would fight back, not with tears and pleas, but with cunning and determination. I would expose her treachery, reveal her true nature to the world, and reclaim what was rightfully mine. The first step was to disappear. I couldn't stay in the city, not while Martha held all the cards. I needed time, space, and a new identity to plan my next move. I withdrew what little money I had left from my bank account, packed a small bag with essentials, and left a note for Miss Evans, thanking her for her efforts and promising to be in touch.
Then, under the cover of darkness, I slipped away, leaving my old life behind like a discarded skin. I traveled to a small, remote town in the mountains, a place where no one knew me and where I could blend in with the scenery. I found a small, dilapidated cabin on the outskirts of town and rented it for a few months, paying in cash to avoid leaving a paper trail. The cabin was basic, with no electricity or running water, but it was a safe haven, a place where I could lick my wounds and plot my revenge. I spent my days reading, studying Martha's every move, and meticulously planning my counterattack. I replayed every conversation, every interaction, every detail of her betrayal in my mind, searching for weaknesses, for vulnerabilities, for a way to strike back. I knew that I couldn't confront her directly. She was too powerful, too well protected. I needed to find a way to undermine her, to expose her lies, and to turn the tables on her. I knew that it wouldn't be easy, that it would require patience, cunning, and a willingness to play dirty. But I was prepared to do whatever it took to reclaim my life and to bring Martha to justice. They thought they were untouchable. That was their fatal mistake. I smiled. I acted broken, but I was recording everything. In the solitude of the cabin, my mind became a steel trap, meticulously dissecting Martha's actions, searching for the cracks in her armor. I realized her weakness wasn't just greed, but vanity. She craved the spotlight, the admiration of the social circles she now frequented, and that craving would be her undoing. My initial plan was simple exposure, gathering irrefutable evidence of her fraudulent activities and presenting it to the authorities. But Miss Evans' warning echoed in my mind. Martha's lawyer was a shark, adept at twisting the law to protect his client. A direct legal confrontation would be a protracted and uncertain battle, one I couldn't afford to lose again. I needed something more, something that would bypass the legal system and strike directly at Martha's carefully constructed image. So I started small. Using a burner phone and a heavily encrypted email account, I began leaking carefully curated snippets of information to local gossip blogs and social media accounts frequented by Martha's new social circle. These weren't outright accusations, but subtle hints, whispers of financial irregularities and questionable business practices. Is the new CEO of company name really as successful as she seems? One post would ask, followed by a seemingly innocent question about the source of her sudden wealth. The goal wasn't to immediately destroy her reputation, but to plant seeds of doubt, to create an undercurrent of suspicion that would slowly erode her credibility.
The next phase involved a deeper dive into the company's finances.
I remembered Martha's penchant for lavish parties and extravagant purchases, all seemingly funded by company accounts. I needed concrete proof, something that couldn't be dismissed as mere speculation. I spent weeks learning about forensic accounting, scouring online resources, and even contacting a former colleague of Miss Evans who specialized in financial investigations. He, under the veil of strict anonymity, provided me with invaluable insights into how to trace illicit funds and uncover hidden transactions. Armed with this knowledge, I managed to hack into Martha's personal email account, a risky maneuver, but one that yielded a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. I found emails detailing her secret offshore accounts, invoices for personal expenses disguised as business expenditures, and even communications with her lawyer outlining their strategy to oust me from the company. I carefully downloaded and encrypted all the relevant data, creating multiple backups to ensure its safety. My heart hammered in my chest with each passing minute, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I was walking a tightrope. One wrong step could send me tumbling into the abyss. One close call sent a jolt of fear through me. While sifting through the company's digital records, I accidentally triggered an alert notifying the IT department of a potential security breach. I immediately disconnected from the system and wiped my tracks, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they traced the intrusion back to me. I had to move faster. I decided to accelerate my plan, to bring my revenge to a head before Martha had a chance to discover my activities and retaliate. The key, I realized, was to expose her wrongdoing on a grand scale, in a way that would capture the attention of the media and the public. I remembered Martha's upcoming charity gala, a high-profile event that she had been meticulously planning for months. It was to be her crowning achievement, a symbol of her success and philanthropy. It was also the perfect stage for her downfall. I decided to leak all the evidence I had gathered to a reputable investigative journalist, someone with a track record of exposing corporate corruption. I carefully crafted an anonymous email outlining Martha's fraudulent activities and providing links to the encrypted data I had collected. I knew that the journalist would be skeptical, but the sheer volume and detail of the evidence would be impossible to ignore.
The anticipation was almost unbearable. Days turned into sleepless nights as I waited for the journalist to respond. I constantly checked my burner phone and email account, my nerves frayed and raw. Finally, a reply arrived, a terse message requesting a secure meeting. I agreed, choosing a neutral location in a nearby city, a place where I could remain anonymous and untraceable. The meeting was brief but productive. I provided the journalist with a detailed overview of Martha's scheme, answering her questions and providing her with additional documentation. She seemed impressed by the thoroughness of my investigation and promised to look into the matter further. I knew that the next few days would be crucial, that Martha's fate hung in the balance. The final piece of my plan involved the gala itself. I knew that Martha would be expecting some sort of disruption, that she would be on high alert. But I had a surprise waiting for her, a final act of defiance that would shatter her carefully constructed facade. I had managed to obtain a copy of the gala's guest list and had sent anonymous invitations to a number of prominent figures in the business world, individuals who had been directly affected by Martha's ruthless business practices. These weren't ordinary guests. They were victims of her greed, individuals who had lost their jobs, their businesses, and their livelihoods because of her selfish ambition. I knew that their presence at the gala would create a tense and volatile atmosphere, one that would further expose Martha's true nature. My plan was set. The stage was ready. It was time to unleash my revenge. The day they tried to end me was the day revenge was born. The gala night arrived, cloaked in a deceptive air of elegance and celebration. I watched from afar, a ghost in the shadows, as the black limousines pulled up to the red carpet, disgorging the city's elite in their glittering gowns and tailored suits. Martha, radiant in a designer dress that probably cost more than my cabin, greeted her guests with practiced charm, basking in the adoration of the crowd. But beneath the surface of smiles and handshakes, I sensed a current of unease, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The carefully orchestrated facade was already beginning to crack. The journalist, bless her soul, had published her exposé just hours before the gala, detailing Martha's fraudulent activities and presenting irrefutable evidence of her corruption.
The story had gone viral, spreading like wildfire across social media and dominating the headlines of every major news outlet. Martha's carefully constructed image was crumbling before her very eyes, but the real fireworks were yet to come.
As the guests mingled inside the ballroom, sipping champagne and making small talk, the individuals I had secretly invited began to arrive. They were a motley crew, a mix of former employees, disgruntled investors, and small business owners, all united by a common bond. They had all been victims of Martha's ruthless ambition. Their faces were etched with a mixture of anger, resentment, and a burning desire for justice. I watched with satisfaction as they made their way through the crowd, their presence disrupting the carefully curated atmosphere of wealth and privilege. Martha's eyes widened in alarm as she spotted them, her composure visibly cracking. She tried to avoid them, to steer clear of their accusing glares, but they were relentless, their presence a constant reminder of her past sins. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. The music seemed to falter, the laughter died down, and all eyes were on Martha, waiting to see how she would react. The air crackled with anticipation. The storm was about to break. Then, as Martha took to the stage to deliver her opening remarks, the unthinkable happened. A figure emerged from the crowd, a former employee who had lost everything because of Martha's greed. He walked slowly and deliberately towards the stage, his eyes fixed on Martha, his face a mask of righteous anger. Security guards rushed to intercept him, but he brushed them aside with surprising force, his determination fueled by years of pent-up frustration. He reached the stage, grabbed the microphone from Martha's trembling hand, and began to speak, his voice booming through the ballroom. He recounted his story, detailing how Martha had cheated him out of his livelihood, how she had destroyed his family, and how she had left him with nothing. His words were raw, emotional, and utterly devastating. The silence in the room was deafening. Martha stood frozen, her face ashen, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. Other victims began to speak out, adding their voices to the chorus of condemnation. They shared their stories of betrayal, of exploitation, and of the devastating consequences of Martha's actions. The crowd listened in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and disgust. The gala had transformed into a tribunal, a public reckoning for Martha's sins. Seeing the chaos unfold, Martha's lawyer tried to intervene, attempting to shut down the proceedings and restore order. But his efforts were futile. The crowd had turned against him, their sympathy lying squarely with the victims. He was shouted down, booed, and eventually forced to retreat, his shark-like grin replaced with a look of bewildered panic. Martha, realizing that she had lost control of the situation, tried to flee, to escape the storm of criticism that was engulfing her. But the doors were blocked, the exit sealed. She was trapped, exposed, and utterly vulnerable. The police arrived, sirens blaring, adding to the pandemonium. They waded through the crowd, their presence a stark reminder of the legal consequences that awaited Martha. As they approached her, she collapsed, her body racked with sobs. The carefully constructed facade had shattered completely, revealing the broken, desperate woman beneath. They led her away in handcuffs, the cameras flashing, her downfall captured for the world to see. The scene was utter pandemonium. News crews swarmed the building. The carefully selected guests, the city's elite, were now witnesses to a spectacle they would never forget. The final piece of my plan clicked into place. An anonymous tip led authorities to her offshore accounts. The evidence was overwhelming. Martha's empire crumbled. They thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The courtroom was a spectacle. Martha, stripped of her designer clothes and carefully crafted persona, looked frail and defeated. The evidence, meticulously gathered and presented, was irrefutable. The offshore accounts, the falsified invoices, the secret communications, it all painted a damning picture of greed and corruption. Her lawyer, sweating profusely, attempted to argue that she was a victim of circumstance, a naive businesswoman who had been misled by unscrupulous advisors.
but his words rang hollow, drowned out by the overwhelming weight of the evidence and the collective outrage of the victims who filled the gallery. The judge, unmoved by his pleas, delivered the sentence: a lengthy prison term, a hefty fine, and a complete forfeiture of her assets. As the bailiffs led her away, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a brief moment of clarity before the prison door slammed shut, sealing her fate. Her world, once filled with luxury and power, had shrunk to the confines of a prison cell. The empire she had built on lies and deceit had crumbled to dust. Her reputation, once pristine and admired, was now synonymous with fraud and betrayal. The fallout was swift and brutal. The company she had commandeered was placed under investigation, its assets frozen, its reputation tarnished beyond repair. Her social circle, once eager to bask in her reflected glory, abandoned her without a second thought, their loyalty as shallow and opportunistic as her own. The media feasted on her downfall, dissecting every detail of her crimes and reveling in her public humiliation. Her name became a cautionary tale, a symbol of the perils of unchecked ambition and unbridled greed. Even her own family disowned her, unable to reconcile themselves with the monster she had become. She was utterly alone, stripped of everything she held dear, her life in ruins. The woman who had once seemed untouchable was now a pariah, ostracized and condemned by all. I watched it all unfold from the shadows, a silent observer of her well-deserved demise.
There was no joy in it, no sense of triumph, only a cold, detached satisfaction that justice had finally been served. The small town in the mountains became my sanctuary. I slowly rebuilt my life, piece by piece, shedding the bitterness and resentment that had consumed me for so long. I found solace in nature, in the quiet solitude of the mountains, in the simple rhythms of rural life. I learned to forgive, not for Martha's sake, but for my own. I realized that holding on to anger and hatred only poisoned me, preventing me from moving forward. I started a small business, using my skills and experience to help others, to create something positive and meaningful. I surrounded myself with good people, people who valued honesty, integrity, and compassion. I found peace, not in revenge, but in rebuilding. The scars of the past remained, a constant reminder of the pain I had endured, but they no longer defined me. I had emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I had reclaimed my life, not by destroying Martha, but by healing myself. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.